Hello and welcome to my podcast, Learn Reiki and Connect, and it's with me, Tracy Matthews. So this week we are talking about all you need to know about chakras. So before we just jump in, just like to say a warm welcome to everybody. This space is really about helping each other out so that we can connect with the light within the higher self. And here's what I've noticed: if we listen to that part, it really helps us out. And this is what this podcast is about. It's really about helping those who want to tune in, to find a way that they can really tune into their inner voice, that part of them, the higher self, living from the inside out, listening to that part. Because when we enter into difficult challenges or parts of our life or our spiritual journey that we don't feel particularly happy, or we can't work out what's wrong, but we know we're misaligned at some level, this is where we can really start to tune in and seek the wisdom and the knowledge and find out, well, why? Why is it? Because I've always said, it's all about finding that information, that's accessing that information. But how do we actually do that? How can you find out what's really going on and what's behind a lot of our symptoms and a lot of the things that we're going through? So for me, my journey's helped me to listen and trust that part. And in my work, I've worked with so many people over the years where that part really does help us out. And especially when we look through the lens of our soul, because that's where we're going to see the truth. That's where we're going to remember what we're here to do and what we've come here to do. So let's just jump right on in. And in this week, we are talking about all you need to know about chakras. So are you interested in chakras? When you saw the title of this, what was your thoughts that were running through you? Are you aware just how chakras play a part in our well-being, in our physical, emotional, mental health? How do you sense chakras that are out of balance? So that's really what we're going to be looking at. What role do the chakras play in our lives, our mental, emotional and physical body? And what are chakras telling you? And how can you interpret and tune in to these energy centers? So stick around, don't go anywhere, stay with me and hit the subscribe button, because I will be speaking every week, and because this is the place to be where we can really sort of talk about some of these deeper issues, some of these ways in which we can access this information. So we are really talking about what role do chakras play in our mental, emotional and in our physical bodies. Well, what I've learned is that they're the biggest show and tell we have. They really do help us out. They let us know what's going on. And they even narrow down in what life area. And I would go as far as saying it's got a communication of its own. Because these energy centres, really, they run parallel with the physical and our spiritual selves. So with this, we really need to sort of understand what these chakras are really all about. Now, I think we all know a thing or two about chakras, and it might mean that you're quite well seasoned. You know lots of information about it, where they're situated. But I think it's just really nice to sort of go through that, to sort of really understand, well, what are chakras? What do you think chakras are? Essentially, chakras are focal points, if you like. They are wheels of energy within our subtle spiritual body. I always sort of view it like we have the physical body. We all know that because we're in the physical dimensional state of reality that we've got here. But there is an overlay to that. And that overlay is that spiritual, that subtle side of us. And that's where these chakras are. In fact, these chakras, I always find them quite fascinating, because in my course of my work and my journey in my own personal life, they can have too much energy running through them and too little energy running through them. And that will always come out in our lives, and that will be felt. That will be, if you like, manifested. So too little is really kind of the people that I see in my work, in terms of they know something's not right with them. They know that they feel drained, tired, they're not feeling right, and that's when people reach out. And also with these chakras, there is 7 of them which are located at different points of the physical body. So these chakras are very interesting. I actually found them in my journey, in my own life, really a way in which I can sort of focus in and work out what's going on with me, because it does affect us. And not only is there the 7 that's located, if you like, in the physical body, but there are also others that are situated outside of the body. And guess what? They also pretty much affect what's going on within our physical and our spiritual lives. One of the ones which I like to talk about and I focus in on, because I think there's a lot of this going on in our spiritual journey, is our 8th chakra, and how that is situated sort of really just outside the physical body. But essentially they all have different functions, and they mean various things. So that's why we can't really talk about chakras and not really sort of go through which ones that they are and how they can show up for us. Because otherwise, it's going to be a little bit sort of confusing, I think, if we don't sort of know where they are, understand a little bit about them. So in terms of our chakras, there are 7, like I mentioned, within the physical body. And like I said, we do kind of know a lot about them, but I'd like to share a little bit what I have found out in terms of what can go on for us. So the first one is located sort of at the bottom of the spine, in the groin area, and it's often depicted the colour of red. This is pretty much the centre of our survival and belonging, whether that's to a tribe, a family, and even to the planet Earth. Now, we kind of know what, when we're feeling aligned. I think that's pretty obvious. I think what a lot of us try and work out, well, what does it look like when we're misaligned or imbalanced? So I like to sort of just help people to understand what that can look like. So this is what I have found out. So imbalance in this root chakra can have a sense of no belonging. That there's a little bit of a sense that you don't feel like you relate to being here. It can also include your safety. It can also include money. Being ungrounded. That you don't feel like you're quite here and you don't maybe want to be here. And that can lead to being disinterested in the simple things of joy and pleasure in the physical life. So how does that sort of sit with you? Because I think we, like I mentioned, we do know what it looks like when we feel aligned, because that's wonderful. But when we start hitting areas of our life and we don't understand what these feelings mean, what do our thoughts mean, why do we feel ungrounded, well, where is it sort of coming from? Well, our root chakra kind of pinpoints this, and this is something where we can look at. So let's move through onto our second one. This one's a sacral, often depicted as orange. Now, this is the centre of our desire, pleasure, procreation and creativity and sexuality. Now, imbalance, and when this is not flowing right, the energy through this can show up as financial issues. Now, you might sort of think, well, how can that be? Well, this is quite interesting, that one of the areas in which this can really flag up is financially. Trouble manifesting what you want. There's also an element of feeling unimportant and low self-esteem. So I always find this one, sacral, very, very interesting. And this came up for me at certain aspects in my life. And it came up with the whole issue of manifestation. And closely related to that was financial, just all around. If it's not work, it's money and that kind of stuff. So let's just move on. Let's just go through these and let's see then how we can start sort of seeing the bigger picture. So the third one is the solar plexus. So this is normally depicted as yellow in colour. And this is the centre of our feelings. This is the personal power. This is where our ambition and our ability to achieve. So this is like our gut, our stomach. Now, when imbalance is in this area, it shows up, can sometimes look like we're stuck. And we're having difficulty with motivation. Maybe we're struggling with goals. There's an element of fatigue. There's perhaps no personal power behind it. Again, this is an area that I really struggled with. And I really had to sort of look at what was behind this and where this was coming from. And it was quite interesting for me, this really showed up in my physical stomach. And I started to have issues in the physical. And we'll move into that a little bit in a minute. But this was a biggie for me, my stomach. That might be resonating a little bit with you. So let's just move into the fourth. Well, this is the heart. And this is often depicted as the green colour. And we know that this is the centre of love and compassion. So let's look how this imbalance can show up. Well, this is all to do with love. And if it's not towards others, it's about ourselves. So, love. Maybe there's an element of just being critical of ourselves, that we just don't show love. Maybe there's a feeling of just a bit of jadedness in that area. It might be all about us, but then it might also include how we relate to others, and it might be affecting our relationship, because that's what the heart centre is all about, is love and compassion. So when we move up, the next area is the throat. And this is often blue in colour as it's associated. This one is the centre of communication, and it's also self-expression. So what does that look like then? Well, this can show up as unexpressed, that we're not able to speak up. It could even be evolved around our listening or even being heard. It can also include unable to give authentic self-expression. So I'm sort of picking little things out, but each of them are really subjective and they're loaded. And sometimes when we're going through certain things, just by nature of hearing the fact that it's related to communication or being heard can really resonate with a person. And especially when we're going through something like that, we perhaps can't see the full picture. All we know, it's coming out that way. So maybe that is something that has just kind of hit home and done a little bit of a ping, because that's what happens when we sort of listen to certain things, or we sort of understand and get a little bit of a nudge. We start getting pings and information. So let's just go to the 6th one, which is the third eye. So this is often indigo in colour, and this is pretty much all to do with our perception, the spiritual nature in our lives, this inner vision, if you like, our wisdom. So again, what does that look like? What does imbalance? What can that show up like? Well, this is being unable to access your own intuition. There may be a difficulty of getting insight, clarity, just trouble accessing your own sense of purpose rather, or your individual path. And again, there's a lot of information there, but when we start sort of realising that these feelings that we have, these thoughts, or we don't understand really, well, where are they coming from? Well, this is how this communication and understanding, well, this is a third eye. So this is really about intuition and lack of clarity, it can often show up as. So let's look at the 7th chakra. This is the crown. This is often violet in colour. Now, this is the centre of our higher states of consciousness. Just being aware. Our enlightenment, knowing stuff, knowing information, our spiritual connection. So what can imbalance show up as? Well, this is a disconnect from source. This is no connection, or there is limited or hit and miss, or that guidance from the higher self, from that inner knowing, that inner intuition. And it shows up as disempowerment. My goodness, I've seen that a lot, and it's happened to me. So this is really powerful when we start to understand just how important these focal energy points are, because they're going to have a physical aspect to them, and how that shows up in our physical lives, but it also shows up in our spiritual and energetic being, in that part of ourselves. Now I'm going to move into the 8th chakra. This is the soul chakra. This is an interesting one, and I came across this really when my journey started to move into the Akashic records, because this is a chakra that really is all about karmic residue. In other words, what we've been doing previously in other lifetimes, where we just keep on, with these, if you like, beliefs, these self-limiting beliefs that we carry, and the patterns and They can also include the other aspect of ourselves, which is uncovering our spiritual gifts, who we really are at a soul perspective, on our soul purpose in the present life. So I've always found this one to be really impactful, and how I could start understanding why there's a lot of, for me along my path, where I started to really get interested and really start getting a sense of, I've been here before. This is not new, but I didn't understand where that was coming from. So this helps us to understand that this is really from that 8th chakra. And how imbalance can show up is where we can have that sense of lack of purpose. There's a level of confusion, or perhaps we feel unsettled. There's a level of feeling like there's no direction in our lives. And it can also have the flip side of there's a little bit of an obsession with spirituality and enlightenment. And that's quite a key one there, because that really kind of happened to me, where it was really on the other side. And I really had to sort of work out and listen to that part. Where's that from? So it's quite fascinating. And then we then begin to understand that these energies, these chakra focal points, are really quite sort of big. Like I said, they're the biggest show and tell we got once we understand what it looks like and how it can affect a person emotionally, mentally, and also physically. So, and just to give you an example of that with clients that often come, if not for a Reiki session, or they might have come for one of the services, or they come for the Reiki course, what they often will say is, I don't feel 100% right. I know that there's something wrong. So they start sort of getting a sense that they need to be there, that maybe there is an aspect going on for them, that they feel that there's a little bit of a lack of clarity, that they're having problems with connecting with what they're here to do. And when in line of when someone is talking about that, and quite often when I'm holding that space for a Reiki healing session, I'm very well aware of it's a third eye. It's from that aspect of themselves. So it's really quite interesting, and hence that's why I say there is a level of communication. In fact, that they can speak to us once we know how we can sort of look at it and map it out. So what are your chakras telling you? In light of just going through, just very briefly there, we just reminded ourselves what they can look like. What's going on for you at the moment? It's something that can happen with us. We've got these thoughts, we've got these emotions, but we don't know where they're coming from. So is it coming from, now that you're getting a sense, is it from the heart? Is it to do with love? Well, that's going to be the heart chakra. Is it to do with being heard? Is it to do with our speaking? That's to do with our throat, and so on. And this is how we can start then really piecing this together. So chakras are really powerful. And, you know, how we can interpret and tune into these chakras, well, I'd like to share a 3-step guide where we're going to look at the chakra and the life area that each chakra is associated. And then you can personally work out just where that imbalance and what's going on for you, and so that you can sort of look at that and see it for yourself. This is a really powerful way in which we start to intuit. We can start then tuning in and listening to that part, but essentially where it's coming from. So this 3-step guide, this will help you to bring attention to some key areas, your thoughts, and how that translates to your feelings, and then to the physical body. Now the physical body is kind of 2 parts. It's kind of like the place where physical ailments and when we get sick, our physical body is the last place things show up. And then I also want you to have a look at actions, because when we do an action, then that can affect us, or sometimes it's a lack of action. And just really looking at the overall contribution of what's causing an imbalance that's perhaps going on for you right now. So I'll explain that a little bit more. So let's just look at this one at a time. So let's look at the mental body, because essentially that's our mind. That's where we hold our thoughts. So a good area to start is to think about the most prominent thoughts that are in your mind right now. So just think about that. And I would always recommend when you do something like this, just make sure you're in a calm place. Maybe after you've just done some meditation, or if you practice Reiki, that you just connect in, tune in with that light source energy. And just set the intention that you're going to state that this information's coming from that part of you. Because what that's going to do, you're going to start identifying now what's a little off balance. Which chakra does it associate with? So what thoughts are predominantly running through your mind right now? And you might need to perhaps write them down. Be aware of those thoughts. What are they? What area are they in? Are they to do with the area of love? Is it about a relationship? Is something going on there? Is it about how you feel about yourself? Is it how you feel about somebody else? So do you get the picture? What are these thoughts? And the thing is, it's just being conscious about these thoughts, because they're probably running through you all the time, but we don't sort of look at them. And I always think that's quite powerful when we start looking really at some of the things that we're doing unconsciously. So just what are these thoughts? What life area do they relate to? What would you say which chakra it's in? Is it in the heart? Is it to do with intuition? Is it to do with just feeling a little bit purposeless, like directionless, like we were talking about? Level obsession with spirituality and enlightenment. Is it to do with communication? Is it to do with feeling stuck? You feel fatigued at the moment? And so on. So then you'll start to get an idea, really, from which chakra that is from. So once you've done that, then you can move into your emotions, because our thoughts transfer into our feelings. And this is very telling. And a good question to ask right now is, how are you feeling? When you associate, when you're aware now of those thoughts, how do they make you feel? Anxious, sad, worry? And start noticing what these predominant thoughts are. Identify the chakra that they could possibly relate to. And then the next logical step is to describe fully and exactly how you're feeling. And that might mean that you have to be completely honest whilst you're doing that. You might need to just sit there and think about it or write it down, because sometimes that gives you more clarity. The next step is really to do with our physical. It's all to do with the physical body, the manifestation of where things are showing up, where there's some balances. Because this is a crucial part in getting an idea of what is off balance that can look like. What is it telling you? So I said there was a bit of a two-part here, because one is the physical life experience, which I always think is the biggest show and tell bit, and how we interpret that kind of information. And the next bit, and just to add to that, sometimes these thoughts and feelings, we get really low, and then right behind that is our health. Our health can be really deteriorating. And sometimes they're in those areas of exactly, where the chakra is misaligned. Now that happened to me. In my physical body, my stomach was really starting to play up. Then I was doing visits to the doctors. Then it turned into tablets. Then I had a digestive issue. And then I peeled this right back. Then I started to look at what's going on. Which chakra does this relate to? Okay, well, this chakra relates to my stomach. Okay, so this is really all to do with my motivation, my fatigue. Yes, I was feeling a lot of that. I felt really stuck. Then there was things I wanted to do, but then the things that I felt I needed to do, I was too scared to do. And I share quite openly about this on various topics in the podcast. If you've been listening, you might be familiar with some of those. But I didn't like what my path had wanted me to do. I didn't like that part. And then I dug my heels in. And then guess what? That physical aspect of myself really started to deteriorate. And my health started to deteriorate. So I really had to sort of look at this. Well, what was behind it? Well, I realised then that this was my solar plexus. And then I had to look at the action. What did I want to do? What was I not doing? And then physically, and that looked a little bit like certain foods I had to look at because they were disagreeing with my digestion. Then I had to look at my actions. What was I doing? And in my case, what was I not doing? Do you get the picture on how this really can work? And then it was really quite incredible because I started to address some of these issues. And this is where alignment can flow back in. This is really powerful. But in what this looked like is that my health was deteriorating. I didn't understand why I had indigestion. I didn't understand why I had stomach pains. Things weren't really sort of manifesting properly at the doctors. And then we sort of get into a bit of a cycle. So then I had to start, let's go and look at this from the subtle point of view. Let's look at this from the energetic point of view. So I had to look at some of the things that I was eating. That really did help. But what really got things moving is what did I not want to do? Because that was the key thing. Now there was thoughts around that and there were emotions around that. And that's really how I started to tune in to what it was. What was I doing? What was I not doing? How's this contributing to my imbalance, which had got to the physical for me? And this is really powerful because I don't have these issues that plagued me at that. And when I look at this, it's really quite sort of amazing, really, that once we start tuning in and listening, and especially then when we understand how our chakras are really communicating to us and what's going on, and especially when we start to piece it all together, my stomach and my diet and things feel so much better. But most importantly, I'm back on track with my path. Some of the things that kind of worried me, some of the things I didn't really want to do because they felt a little bit too scary, I started to do. They were at the level of action. And then I started to get peace in that area. Started to really not feel that I needed the tablets in order to stop the reflex, the acid that was really struggling with. And then how that started to sort of dissipate. And I started to feel well. And this is really incredible. And it's one of those things, unless we start doing this ourselves, then we start to see the power, excuse me, of how this can really play out in our lives. So what's your chakras telling you? Because I think this is really quite telling. And people often say, well, how do we know? How can we sort of get information? Well, this is a really powerful way in which we can do it. And it's just those simple little things, which is those powerful energy focal points, which is our chakras. We've got 7 of them, which are embedded and located within our physical body, in the subtle body. We've also got that one that's just outside, that's just hovering above our crown chakra, and how that really sort of relates. And for me was a biggie when I was going through a lot of imbalance around my purpose and the confusion and just how unsettled I was feeling, and how I was able to map that back. And it's really beautiful, because when we start doing this kind of work, we start to listen, piece it all together. This is when we start to get our truth, because our chakras are part of our energetic being. You know, when we start homing in precisely on these thoughts, translate these thoughts to how we're feeling, then we consider, well, what's going on in our physical body. For that, we might have to look at our health. We also need to look at our personal actions, or possibly the actions that we're not doing. Because what all that does, it paints an energetic picture. It helps us to understand, and really through the confusion and just through the symptoms and the fog that we're in when we don't feel 100% right, we don't understand really what's going on with us. This is a really powerful way in which we can then start pinpointing from which area that this is coming from, and how we go about, and really to sort of put that alignment back into our physical and also back into our spiritual lives as well. Now, one of the most incredible ways in which we can really put this all together is by using dowsing. Now, another word for dowsing is using the pendulum. This is really an incredible way which we can start really sort of putting things together. In fact, we can start speaking and listening and tuning in to our higher self by using this powerful tool and getting that accurate information. So I have also put together a guidebook, a free guidebook on that, and that might be something that you might be interested in doing. But I hope this has really helped you just to find out all that you need about the chakras, because there is a lot of information, a lot of intuition that we already pick up in our lives. But it's just really knowing how to piece it all together, how to put it all together. And that's where I think you might like to try what we just referred to as the 3-step guide. Looking at your thoughts, your emotions and your feelings, looking at the physical body, and then translating that, how that is, and to which chakra that the imbalance is coming from. So I hope you have found that interesting. I hope that you find that of some help, because this is something I use And it's helped me out pretty much so in finding really the root of what's going on. I call it mapping back, because sometimes when we're experiencing imbalance or we don't feel right and in our health, we just don't know how to move forward. But this is a really powerful way, and it really works. So I'd encourage you, have a go. So hit the subscribe button and make sure you don't miss the next one, because we will be talking about how to speak with your higher self using the art of dowsing and using the pendulum. I'm on YouTube, Spotify, and listed on other platforms. And like I said, you might like to have a look at the website at learnreikiandconnect.co.uk, where you'll find not only the home learning, the online Reiki, or you might like to reach out and work with me over Skype with the Reiki courses. But you also might like to have a look at really downloading the free guidebook, where how to speak to your higher self using the pendulum. I've put everything all together over the years of really how we can start really working things out, getting our truth. So you might want to have a look at that. Download that, like I said, but you also might like to have a look at the online course workshop of how to speak with your higher self using the pendulum, and going through exactly all the information in the guidebook. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope that's of some help, and I look forward to speaking with you very, very soon. Until then, do take care, and bye for now.